Hey, welcome to the Introverted Apostle, the podcast for Christian introverts who love Jesus and their faith, but struggle with the social side of church life. I'm Roman Asbill, a proud introvert.
And I'm David Wilson, and I am equally introverted and proud of it.
Here we'll explore what it means to live out our faith as introverts, finding peace in community, purpose in service, and strength in stillness.
We are not psychologists or theologians, just two guys who overthink for fun and decided to hit record while doing it. In today's episode, we are diving into balancing social interaction and spiritual growth. So grab your coffee, settle in, and join us on this quiet journey of faith. Today, our guest is the one and only Father Taylor Elzner. Father Taylor, thanks for joining us today.
Certainly. My pleasure.
It's my understanding that you too are a proud introvert.
I am. I mean, as always, it's good to define terms and sort of to clarify. And so in sort of the traditional sense, I'd consider myself an introvert. If you define that in the sense of recharging by being in small groups or being alone rather than big social settings. But as always, it's good to be clear about what we mean when we say a thing.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, in episode 1, we visited with Dana Schertler. She's a licensed counselor, and she said it best. Basically, how does your battery charge? Mm-hmm. Does it charge by being around people and you feed off of their energy, or do you recharge by silent reflection, meditation, just kind of being present?
Yeah.
So how do you personally balance your need for solitude with the church's call to community?
Like we mentioned, is I definitely recharge by solitude time. And so there's a bunch of different sort of structures that I've set up into my priestly life. Obviously, there's the ministry of interruptions always is the core of the priesthood, flexibility, presence to people. And so none of these are hard, fast rules, but they at least give me sort of a foundation to start with, to work with. Is important in all of our lives. The core of that, the center of that, is simply a life of prayer, time spent gratuitously with the Lord, the presence of the Lord. So I start each day with at least a holy hour, hour and a half or so, because that's, if I don't sort of put my roots down deep, there's no ability for my branches to reach out far, using Newman's image. And so having to start daily with that sort of rooting time. And ultimately, I mean, that's the core of being an introvert, is sort of having a natural disposition, not towards antisocial, but having a core disposition towards sort of interiority. So Dietrich von Hildebrand talks about that virtue of habitare secum in Latin, which means to dwell within oneself, to remain within oneself. And so I have to start each day by sort of an abiding time in my own heart, not alone, not isolated, not turned in upon myself, but simply starting by remaining within. And we hear all throughout, again, the Gospel of John, Jesus' invitation to stay, to abide, to remain. And so is that our fundamental basic foundation? And if I don't set that as my basic stance towards life, towards the world, towards reality, ultimately I find myself like in the dryer, tumbling head over heel. And so I have to start each day by, staying in that place of being alone with Him. So that's always the foundation, and that's the non-negotiable one. So I have to have that. And so if it means that I have something starting at 8, I'm going to have to get up earlier. If I'm going to have something starting at 7, I have to get up earlier.
Basically creating some margin in your life.
Yeah, definitely. So
yeah, I mean, I can tell you from my own personal experience that when I skip out on my morning prayer time, it makes a huge difference in my day. If I don't spend time with God in the morning, my day is not that good.
Yeah.
It's almost like God's refilling our fuel tanks before we even get started for the day, taking us from empty to full. And then I close my day with that prayer time too, because I'm now on empty, right?
Definitely. There's also that element, like he says in John 15, the Lord, is that We are the branches, and he is that root. And so it's a place not just of, okay, I fill my tank and now I go out alone. It's that place of, I establish the fundamental connection. Where am I receiving today? Where am I drawing from? And I have to remain in communion throughout the day. And so it's not just, okay, I fill up and now I go out and do my stuff. It's, I today start with you, I'll end with you, and I'm receiving from you and flowing out your gifts in and throughout the course of the day. And so it establishes the sort of the fundamental orientation that we keep throughout the day.
Right.
So that's the first practical thing that I do is always start with a gratuitous amount of prayer as much as I can. So,
Roman, do you spend time in the morning in prayer?
Yes.
How does that impact you?
Whenever my wife gets up, whatever time that is, if she's like, if it's 5, 6, 7, I just say, I need to be up 30 minutes before she does, because it takes 30 minutes just for me to become a human being. So I wish that after all these years, I thought, oh, there'll be some infilling of grace that will land on me at some point in my life where I'll just get up and immediately fall to my knees in prayer. So far, that's never happened. So I get up 30 minutes before she does, and I try to feed the 1 million cats that we have and the dog and start the coffee and all that stuff. And then from there, slowly working my way into, after all that's done and I'm awake and I have a cup of coffee in my hand and I'm like, okay, wake up, dear. And then I'm cognitive enough to enter a place of prayer. But I feel like it's, even in that place of prayer over the years, it feels like sometimes you even have to go back further than that. And because I think people hear prayer and you have about 600 million different definitions. And for me, morning prayer has to just be shh. And I do pray the office, but first I just have to just, like you said, I need to plug into a life source, or even the daily office is just rote.
Yeah, and that's definitely what characterizes sort of my morning prayer time, is I'm not actively working through intercessory prayer. I have blocks set later for that. For me, it's simply that place of staying in a place of listening, receptivity, which is, I mean, I think the natural disposition oftentimes of an introvert is all of reality is founded on being dialogic, as theology would say, was a speaking and a response,
Right.
because we're relational. We're in the image of God, who is perfect relation, Trinity. It's what it means to be in the image and likeness of God. And so people tend to fall on the sort of the giving out exterior or the listening, receiving sort of natural disposition scale. And obviously we need a full living of both, but introverts by nature tend to be more, like I said, with a deeper interiority, a space of abiding within to receive. And so my morning prayer is almost always marked first and foremost by a listening, a quiet sort of just attentiveness, an openness to that which God wants to give in the quiet, in the silence. And so it's, for me at least, it's never very active. It's not reading or working through particular things. It's a listening and a remaining with.
I like it. Have you found that moments of quiet or solitude, that they deepen your spiritual life? And obviously they do, but like in what ways does that solitude, that quiet, how does that add depth or layers?
Yeah. I mean, so just for one, I don't really sort of like the term spiritual life. I mean, because we're not,
right.
We don't have, I mean, different lives. We have one life, and it should be a spiritual life. But yeah, so no, I mean, I find that habitare secum, to dwell within myself, living in a place of interiority and remaining, listening, opens up my receptivity in all places of life. And it helps me be present in all places of life. And that's one of the most important things too, is as an introvert who has a natural disposition towards receiving, that we need to keep that quiet space one of receiving, one of openness outwards. Because just like there are gifts and strengths on sort of being on both ends of the disposition spectrum, there's also sort of a shadow side of being on both ends of the spectrum. And so just like an extrovert can be on the superficie in Latin, drawn out by centrifugal force to the surface by their interactions and movements, we too can sort of have that opposite thing of yes, it's good that we're within, but the danger is to do this, to curl in around ourselves.
Right.
And that's never a healthy attitude, never a holy attitude. So to dwell within oneself, even as an introvert, is always a looking upwards and outwards. Yeah, so having a healthy interiority, especially at the start of the day, carries that and can help ground that throughout the course of the day. Because ultimately, if we don't have space for God in the morning, if we don't have space for even being within ourselves at the beginning of the day, we don't have space for those things that we encounter.
Right.
And that's what I find too is okay, I can start from that place, but even as I get spun up a little bit, or I have an emergency situation or a series of difficult appointments, I find myself, I'm drawn out from that place of recollection. And therefore, like Mother Teresa says, it's important to go back to that place. She says, if you're too busy for your holy hour, what did she say? You remember? You need to make two.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So if you're not able to, have and stay in that place of prayer, then you need to extend it, make it bigger, because without a right orientation upwards and outwards, we are unable to channel grace. We're unable to live that receiving and giving that is sort of part of the priestly identity of being a baptized person. And so if we find ourselves turned inwards or turned in a wrong direction, we've got to return to that space again of right orientation, of dwelling within oneself. So
what type of practices, and you've kind of gone into this and how you start your day, but I know you have more you'd like to share. But anyways, what practices help you recharge after social or ministry related activities? Because as a priest, you're kind of the guy at the forefront, right?
It's a very exposed sort of vocation of life. So there's just a bunch of interactions. So you think about how many people that you as a person will greet on a Sunday. It's quite a few. You're going to see a bunch of people there, but the priest is like that times however many more people that walk through that door after you and before you, times 3. So it's a tremendous amount. It's a very exposed vocation, which is a beautiful thing, because it's many beautiful interactions, many chances of receiving and giving, but it takes a lot out of an introvert, as you can imagine. And so, and especially on days where I have a lot of exposure, I definitely have to sort of counterbalance that. And there's a variety of ways I do that. So one is, and this goes again to sort of a structural thing. I know not everybody can do this, but sort of I as a priest aim to follow sort of a guideline of thirds, not the rule of thirds like a picture taking, but if I am active and exposed for 2/3 of the day, if I'm busy and if I'm giving and giving and giving, that other third needs to be a receiving space. Because again, dialogic means inwards and outwards, receiving and giving. And so there should never be a time out of our life that we're not in that receiving, giving space. It's just the differentiation between a primacy of giving and then receiving in the giving. So because y'all know, and y'all have experienced that, in your bestowing the gift upon another, you also are receiving the presence of another.
Right.
So both before, throughout, and after. But if you're doing that, you also need to do a giving through receiving. And so I try and have 1/3 of my day, if I could divide it into thirds, of if this is giving, receiving, to let the other third be giving through receiving. And it's one of the greatest gifts that we can give to God. So think of the devotion to the Sacred Heart. Does the devotion to the Sacred Heart through St. Margaret Mary Alacoque say, I want you to do all of these things for me? No, it says, I want you to receive my mercy. Or think of St. Teresa's offering to merciful love. The deepest gift we give to anybody, first and foremost, is to have space for receiving them. First, to listen. First, to open up an interior space in which they can enter and which they can give. And so if I have to ground that in myself, because I can end up with my giving sort of taking over that receptivity space. And I'm then manipulative. I'm working, I'm controlling, I'm doing for, rather than dialoguing with and bestowing that gift in right relationship. And so what do I do during that third? Again, it has to be flexible. It's the space I have for sort of contemplative activity. So not I don't go in the chapel necessarily and go into ecstatic contemplation or whatever, but contemplation in the broader sense. So contemps. So temp is tempo, time. Con means with in Latin. And so simply to spend time with reality. Obviously, prayer is the highest form of that, but there's a whole world that the Lord has made, lowercase s, sacramental. That by which he communicates with us, he bestows on us, he gives to us. And so it's oftentimes for me listening to music, reading a book, reading not just junk fiction, but literature, spending time with the visual arts, flipping through an art book. Some particular films, etc., can be things of true contemplation, things of beauty. Or I oftentimes literally just go and I have a chair in my room and it looks out the window and I just sit and look out the window just to let reality reveal itself. Beauty is primary because it helps us receive that sort of self-manifestation of reality, which the Lord has willed and bestowed in creation. And so it's the right response to a world that God has said, I am revealing it to you. And I have made it to reveal itself. Again, the first gift we give is attentiveness, is receiving. And so I spend not a full third of my day doing that, but that's the main meat of what makes that other third. So other parts of that include like doing laundry and stuff like that.
So Roman, what kind of activities do you do to kind of help you, I guess, recenter yourself throughout the day?
It might be a reoccurring theme in this podcast that I say this, but I feel like I've spent a lot of time fighting myself in my life. And I'm like you, I don't like to box ourselves in with the term introvert, extrovert. It's great knowledge to have the natural predisposition that we're wired with, but I don't ever want that to become a box that I can't break out of.
Which I think it happens for a lot of us.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And there's times that I still like well, I'm introverted, so I don't, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, I think
we're not going to use that as.
I think sometimes, and I would say this probably more so for introverts and extroverts, that we almost use it as a crutch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we live in a society that loves labels because it's a way of making us feel in control. It makes us feel like we have all this stuff in our hands. And a human heart is something mysterious that isn't reducible. And that's the primary problem of our contemporary society, is that it likes to reduce everything down and leave no mystery in it. And you can hide in a label. You can say, you can use it as an excuse. Okay, I'm this, therefore I don't have to worry about the invitations of grace underneath this label, or the calls to conversion, the calls to growth. Because all of us, by the design of where we are in this life, are in love school. This life is love school. And you don't learn anything in school if you just do only the things that you exactly like. Yes, you have to respect your nature, but nature needs to be tended towards growth, towards stretching out. Love without stretching is not love at all. That's how we open that space. And that's ultimately what that prayer time, interiority time does, is it's a stretching and an opening. And I think maybe y'all's experience attests to that too. It's also oftentimes a place of desiring. You become aware of, I'm aching for this in prayer. And Augustine says that desire is precisely the thing that expands the heart. It's one of the core elements of love. So we can really oftentimes, okay, I put a label on it. I don't have to mess with that anymore. Or don't let him mess with it. So,
and I think when I was saying, when I fight myself, one of the things that I've had to learn to allow myself to do, because I've always been a daydreamer and always just in school, and you just drift off and then you're like, hey, you with us? And yes, there's a time and a place. I get that. But sort of my whole life started fighting that. Oh, well, daydreaming is just, you should never daydream. And then I realized I am wired in that way, and if I don't allow space for that, then it's almost like, I don't know if I would go as far to say harmful, but like I have to have space to daydream. And by daydream, I don't mean just about anything. But if I get up, and there's been mornings I'll sip coffee and I'm like, oh, where did that land on my palate? I know it's kind of silly, but it's just something that I'm like, oh, it landed here. Or just noticing something and allowing myself to go into the minutia of thinking about that particular thing.
Right.
And not stopping it and go, oh, no, dial it in. But just allowing myself, if I'm in prayer, if I'm reading scripture and I go, oh, that's really beautiful. Oh, but I've got to get through these 16 more verses, to not always feel obligated to get through the 16 verses so that I can have a pretty check mark, but to just sit still with what leaked out and allow myself to go into that place. That is helpful to me sometimes in the morning, but also especially after, if I'm exhausted, if I've spent all my emotional energy with people and I'm just peopled out. Daydreaming helps recharge that. Again, specific daydreaming, not just like, going off and thinking about unvirtuous things. But when we say grace perfects nature, can you give us like a short definition of grace in that context? Because I think grace, coming from a Protestant background, grace had like one definition, And so I know in the Catholic world, I really appreciated the grace coming to life in so many different avenues. But in that context, when it's grace perfects nature, what is grace in that context? What are we talking about?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm going to sidestep the question and talk about nature, because you have to understand nature to understand grace on top of it, or in and through it. And so nature, another way of understanding nature is givenness. So all things contain within themselves a particular way of being in the world that God has bestowed upon them. And that involves their organization, structure, the way they are, what makes them to be what they are. But part of that also is what would be called teleology, that towards which that they are made, that which they move towards. It would be what Aquinas would call the final cause, or that towards which. And so nature, by its design, is a particular way. There are things that lead towards what the classics would call is perfection, not in the sense of perfectionism or having no little things off, but perfection in the sense that Christ gave it in Scripture, fullness, per facere, to be made all the way through, to be grown into completion. And so what is human nature? Well, human nature is to be made one by God, towards God, ficisti nos ad te, as Augustine is always quoted. You made us towards yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you, made towards communion, etc. And what grace is gratia. It is that gift of God, that work of God, that bestowal from God, unearned and not made by us, from Him outside. The Catholic tradition would say that grace is sort of a created help, but you don't have to get down into the nitty-gritty of it, but at its core, it's the life of the Holy Spirit that works in the soul. There's that famous part from Office of Readings that talks about the work of the Spirit being like water that is taken up by all different life forms, that is drawn up by them, and is ultimately that which is required for their growth. Obviously, it's just an image, but it is that which allows a thing to grow fully into what it is in its different manifestations. A rose takes water and grows up into being a rose in accordance with its interior nature, its telos, and its essence. And so it is also, too, with the human person. So grace takes what we are and fills it and draws it out towards fullness and completion. But it also goes beyond it, because the telos of man is not only a natural telos. It's not only a created end. Out of all of creation, angels excluded, we're the only ones that have a supernatural telos, an elevated telos. So instead of finding fulfillment, okay, just a normal, happy life to the end, having kids, dying, etc., is our vocation is upwards. Think of the first paragraph of the Catechism. In a plan of sheer goodness, the Lord made us. For what? Towards sharing his own divine life. And so grace is, to use another image, God's reaching down to us, lifting us up and fulfilling us, helping us grow into who we are, but also lifting us up above ourselves, beyond ourselves, opening up in us that capacity to do which is beyond all of our capacities, to live God's own life, his own life of relationality, love, communion, gift, which we're predisposed to. He made us towards that, but again, it's beyond our natural capacities. And so grace is that bestowed gift by which God fulfills us and makes us whole, but also takes that fulfilled whole up into relationship and life with him, which is why it's called being in a state of grace. It doesn't just literally mean, okay, I have my grace cup, I have the state of grace. It means that the life of God is alive and active in me, the life of charity. Again, charity not in the sense of I just give good things to other people, but I am drawn into God's gift living. And so I am receiving and giving gift. So grace is simply that which sustains the life of charity in the soul. So,
in my armchair theologian terms, would that be that prevenient grace that comes first? And then our role in that is cooperating with what's given beforehand. Yeah. Because I know I know there are, there's work on our part. But there's got to be something to cooperate with first.
Exactly. I mean, we could go way deep into the weeds. In the church there's all of those like 7 paragraphs in the Catechism around the 2000s about grace and its manifestations and the types and names, etc. And I don't know if, okay, there's something true to that, but I don't know if it's the most helpful to cut things all apart. So the West, we're very, very analytical. We like to cut things apart, and I'm not always sure that we can put it all back together. Right. And so I oftentimes helpful to counterbalance that with sort of the Eastern perspective of mysterion, of mystery. And grace is something transcendent. It's something from God that is mysterious. Right. Yeah. But it is definitely too, so something that involves active cooperation. So I gave a homily this last week about what enabled the pitcher Yamamoto to do what he did and become MVP and do what's never been done before, win 3 of the 4 games needed to win the World Series. And I talked about it takes commitment, and yet we live in a world afraid of commitment. And I talked too about me needing to learn Spanish and how at the beginning of seminary I said, by the time I will be ordained, I will be fluent in Spanish by God's help. And so it takes an active living choice, commitment, a limiting of our freedom for the sake of a greater freedom. I talked about, am I free to play the piano? And they all said, yes, you are. You're the priest. And I said, well, no, I'm not. I mean, in one sense, I am. One sense, I'm not. In libertas, I am. Nobody's tying my hands down, but I'm not free because I've not yet committed myself down to the discipline of learning the piano. I can go bang on it, and I can make all sorts of noise, but I cannot play the piano. I'm not free to.
That's how I play the piano.
Yeah. And so there's, again, why do I say that? Because, again, it shows an element of how our cooperation works. With me learning Spanish, I would say, okay, I'm going to learn Spanish. And then, God, I need the gift of tongues. I need the gift of language. Okay, well, he did sort of bestow the gift of tongues, but in a different way. So I started an hour a day, 5 days a week, and I said, I'm going to continue doing this all the way through. And I did. So 5 days a week, an hour a day of Spanish. What happened was grace came and took my effort, my cooperation, and lifted it up from underneath and bestowed a sort of gift of tongues, and that I was fluent in a year, which does not happen. It's crazy. Well, okay, God took nature's efforts and made them fruitful. Took those limited, weak things that we offered to him, like bread, like wine, transforms and elevates and makes them fruitful.
Preach.
Ultimately, that's what grace and cooperation look like, is we've got to try. We've got to use all of the resources at our disposal. We've got to commit ourselves. We got to tie our freedom towards which we're wanting to grow. and trust fully in God to come and to lift us up from behind. We won't always feel it, we won't always experience it, but grace is that which makes human effort efficacious. So, and transcends it, obviously goes beyond it. And that doesn't mean there aren't particular supernatural charisms or gifts of grace that are bestowed without much effort on our part. Almost always it is a nature's trying and a lifting, and a grace's drawing up and strengthening from within while lifting it beyond itself.
And the tie-in, if someone's like, we just so went off on grace, and how does that tie into introversion? Because I feel like to have a natural disposition to hide at dinner parties in the bathroom, I have to have a supernatural grace in my life that is beyond the natural disposition that I was born with to do this.
Right.
I'm not saying that you can't fake it till you make it. And there is an element of just, I do this because this is the right thing to do. I offer myself to people because it's the right thing to do. Man, it's so much easier when God rests on that, though. And so learning as introverts how to cooperate with his grace to allow him to come in, to go more toward communion to communion instead of that communion to escape.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Definitely. And too, I mean, that's also the grace nature thing is important because it also helps us understand the way grace works, is it doesn't come and override us. It doesn't just, as sometimes as a Protestant perspective would have, just sort of cover it over and just say, okay, it's great, it's all good. It works from within it while respecting what it is. Again, water taken up into a rose makes a rose, not a tree, but a rose. And that's the way grace does with us, is it respects what we are. Because even in the human nature, the human givenness, all of us are given different manifestations of sort of participation in all of that. So natural dispositions, natural gifts, etc. Again, St. Therese talks about the garden. There's little flowers, and there's big flowers, and there's trees, and there's bushes. And grace makes us ourselves. It doesn't make us into something that we aren't fully, but it makes us fully ourselves. And so again, too, as an introvert, it's not going to come and make you all of a sudden, oh, I love being in social parties.
Right.
But it's going to grow you from within and the shape of you while purifying those things that aren't truly outwards towards communion, ultimately while reverencing the original gift that he gave, the original design that he gave. Grace reverences nature because the Lord reverences the way he made us. In the beginning, he says, it is good, it is very good. And so the way he made you is good and is beautiful. And his grace is not going to come and destroy that work, even though it's been fractured by original sin. It's simply going to restore it and then elevate it, magnify it.
We were talking with a friend of ours yesterday, and he's in ministry for a Protestant church. He identifies as an introvert, but he says, I go out there and I preach to people and I interact with people. And he said, so I guess in a way, it's like I've got some extroverted tendencies. But as he was talking to us about that, it sounded more to me because he's a very contemplative individual. And so he spends a lot of time in silence alone with God the Father. And the way he described it, my takeaway from it was it's almost like he's opening himself to receiving God's grace. And through that, he is welcoming the Holy Spirit to work through him whenever he is, displaying the more extroverted tendencies when he's ministering to people and inviting people into community.
I mean, I could definitely see how that would be the case. Again, sort of Newman's thing, roots and branches. So the deeper your roots, the further your reach can go, the further outwards you can reach. And I mean, ultimately, and even those of us with an introvert's disposition, again, so growing towards fullness, it's not going to make us not an introvert, but it's going to make us more balanced. It's going to make us more whole. And obviously that's going to manifest in different ways. So my brother is always going to be a contemplative monk. That's just the way he is. But it's not anti-socialism. As he grows towards maturity, it's a deeper and deeper openness to the world. The heart of a contemplative is radical openness to reality and to the world. And so it is with all of us. Grace is going to respect what we are, but make us more full and whole. And if he's living a deep life of prayer, a deep life of charity and grace, I mean, shouldn't be surprising that the Lord is sort of filling out and filling in those places where he has gaps, but also sort of stretching him into sort of a more full person. I mean, not becoming a different person, but more fully himself, which includes those other capacities. So,
Right. He's allowing God to reveal his full potential, or what he was made, who he was made to be.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and oftentimes we sell ourselves a little bit short. Again, with the danger of a label is to say, okay, that's my label. I don't have to grow beyond it. Okay, a label can help us identify something of what we are, but it should never be a container that we keep ourselves in. So,
Yeah, and I don't even know if I can find words to express this, but where I am challenging myself to grow is I don't want to just be content to learn how to commune with other people for the sake of not being thought a weirdo. I want to grow to where my communion with others is is really truly authentic expression of who I am. It's not just something I suffer through because I need to do this. I genuinely want it to come. I want as someone that is predispositioned more to an introverted life, while not destroying who I am. I do want the best of that to be my communion with other people is not just a stoic habit that I do, that I suffer through for the glory of God, but I want it to genuinely become more and more something that it's genuinely from that place of I want to commune with this person. I want to interact with them. I know my energy is going to deplete. I get it. That's my natural disposition. But I don't want to just do this out of habit. I want everything I've done over here in the quiet place to come over here into this dinner party. And I don't want it to be a place of dread. I want to be like, I'm fine. And I want that life to genuinely come out in that spot. There's a lot of rambling that probably made no sense, but
that's a beautiful desire.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Father Taylor, do you think that solitude and silence are underappreciated in church culture?
Depends on what. So the church is a very, very big and beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And so if you mean American church culture, I think there's definitely, we have an imbalance towards activism, especially in parochial life. Oh, do more things, do all the things, do the things. But on the whole, if you look at the church universal, is I think less. Obviously, it can differ in particular places, but I mean, we have a deep appreciation of the contemplative vocations, a deep appreciation of the importance of prayer. Think about Pope Leo's recent address to hermits. He literally had a full speech just talking about a vocation to be alone with the alone. And that's how important that is for the whole life of the church. And so I think and in a universal sense, it's less of an issue, but especially around here where we don't have many contemplative cores of the church in our daily sort of life, or our not necessarily daily life, but our experience of church. And also sort of utilitarian American culture of you are what you produce, your value comes from what you make. There's a great tendency towards I've just got to do more. But again, no roots, no fruits.
So, Father Taylor, how can introverts ensure that they continue to grow in their faith without feeling socially overextended?
Yeah, I mean, so again, it's in medio virtus. Virtue is in a right balance in the middle. And again, this is not a right balance between selfishness and love. It's a right balance between giving, receiving, and receiving, giving. Always communion. Or two is to put it in theology of the body terms, original solitude and original unity. Obviously, he's talking about a little bit like the vocation of marriage there, but analogously, it applies to all of us, is we need to balance solitude with openness to human communion with our brothers and sisters. And there's a right balance to that. And it's not everybody's going to look exactly like here. Some people's true middle may be sort of off a little bit, but a right balance is important. If I don't take my holy hours, if I don't sort of follow my rule of thirds, I get grumpy, in a manner of speaking. I'm not just a manner of speaking, I do. Ask my secretary. Sorry, Janie. And so it's important to keep a right, holy, healthy balance. And again, the danger in the church is to all absolutize one thing. The definition of heresy is to take one truth and isolate it from the rest. And it always twists and becomes something that it's not. So the church has to hold all of that together. So original solitude with communion as well with our brothers and sisters. And so that would be my recommendation, is that it's incredibly important to do that. And so, yes, I keep my hour and my thirds, but I also have monthly recollection days. And so 3 days out of the month I go and I spend in Panhandle. One is just to be present with the sisters there, to sort of also to experience a vocation that sort of helps balance and ground my own very active vocation. But it's also just a space to help sort of counterbalance that active, giving, flowing social element side. And then every 3 months is I take another sort of special time just to counterbalance. Not every priest, Father Shane, for example, needs that as much as I do, but that's the way my soul is made. I'm sort of more susceptible for my boat being flipped by activity or by extra social. And so it takes putting a lot of weight in solitude, in contemplative activity, in authentic leisure, in being in presence. That way I can continue to be present in my ministry. And everybody that knows me knows when I'm flipped, because I no longer have that primary gift of receptivity, of listening, of space for them. So, and I start trying to fix all their stuff. So
that happens in marriage.
Yeah.
I think husbands are, we can lean into that. I want to fix you instead of, just be present with you. So,
yeah. Well, Father Taylor Elzner is our guest today on the Introverted Apostle. Father Taylor, thank you for joining us. Is there anything else that you would like to close on?
I don't believe so. So it's just I find the name of the podcast interesting, but also it's sort of a good paradox, like Christian Catholic paradox. Is introverted is sort of an unfortunate term that came to be the particular term for sort of having a recharging in solitude, but because introvertere in Latin means to be turned inwards, and an introvert should never live turned inwards. That's the definition of one who is in hell, who's closed the doors out towards communion. And you can sort of create your own experience of total isolation. And so it's interesting that introverted means turned inwards, but apostolane means apo, out from. Stolane means sent or moving outwards. And so Introverted Apostle is, in the very name, helps us to avoid the dangers of wrong introversion, because all of us are sent outwards, not to do active, but to always look and to love and to receive love outside.
Amen.
Amen.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you, Father Taylor.
My pleasure.
And for all of you out there, remember that even a whisper can move mountains. In today's episode, we are diving into, and I did not prepare again. All right.
I don't think so. No, 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 no.